Welcome to Module 1, Lesson 1 of our Bubble course. I'm fired up, so should you be. We're gonna get through this course together. I'm gonna guide you through it step by step, and you're gonna get to the very end of this course and be a master Bubble developer by the end of it. You're not gonna get into Lesson 1 to, no. You're gonna get to the very end of the course. This is not something that you're gonna quit, so let's get right into it. For those of you that had headphones on and volume up super high, sorry for yelling in the mic, but hope you forgive me. So you can see that we're in the main Bubble editing page. Now I have a blank canvas and you can see it's labeled index. Now an index page on Bubble is where your users are going to be first directed. This is by default the page where they're going to land if they go to your Bubble application, unless you change it. The first thing though that I want to show you is what an element is. So you've seen a lot of elements on websites before. Take Airbnb, for example. Everything you see on the page is an element. All of these little buttons, all of these icons, all of the images, everything you see on the page is an element, and they all follow the same exact structure. So let's look at a diagram of what that structure is. So this is the basic breakdown of any element you see on any page. Content, that is going to be the centerpiece of any element. So take the image, for example, that we just saw on Airbnb, and imagine this as your content, and imagine it in this box. So we have our image in the content box, and around that we have padding. Now padding is going to be the space between a border and the element itself, or the content. So if we had an image, and then we had 10 pixels of padding, we have 10 pixels of space in between that image and the border. I hope that makes sense. That's the best way I can describe what padding is. It's that space between the content and the border. Now, margin is going to be that outer space around the content, padding, and border. So if we had a 50 pixel margin, that means we have 50 pixels of space around our entire element, and no other element should be within 50 pixels. We want a 50 pixel margin. When you hear me talk about margin left, margin right, or padding top, padding bottom in future lessons, just note this is what I'm referring to. Padding top, padding right, or we have margin left or margin bottom. When you hear those terms, just imagine this diagram. In fact, you can honestly just print this off or put it on a screen to the side, just so you can reference it in later lessons, and you always kind of know what I'm talking about when I mention those terms. Let's go back to the Bubble editor though. So we can see this in practice. We have a blank canvas, and we have a bunch of elements over here. Now, it may look like a lot when you're just starting out to see all this, but we're gonna cover each one as we go along. So no need to worry about not knowing what all this stuff is yet. We have all these tabs. Don't even start clicking around. Just let's focus on one thing at a time, and as we progress, we'll get into each of these tabs and all of the elements. Let's start with a group. So let's take group, and we'll just drag a big group on our page. And for our purposes, we're going to give it a background really quick, and we'll cover styling later, but just so you can see what it looks like visually. So we have this big group A with a red background, and we're going to put 4 buttons inside of this, just so you can visually see what's going on. Of course, Bubble's going to tell you a bunch of hints along the way. We're super smart though, so we don't need to worry about it. No, I'm just kidding. Pay attention, read those, but for now we'll skip them. And I'm just going to copy this button 4 times. Thanks, Bubble. I thought we just got that. Oh, it's going to do it every time. So every time you make a new button, get ready to do some reading. Okay, and we'll close that. So now you can see we have these elements inside of this group A group. So we can move them around. You can move them anywhere you want. They don't align to each other. They're not snapping to any side of the parent element. And let me touch on that real quick. Parent and children elements. I'm going to be saying these terms maybe a few times throughout the course, so it's important you understand these. So this red box you see on the screen is the parent element on the page. And inside that parent, you have 4 children. The children are going to be the buttons. So on any web page, the biggest element is going to be a parent element, and then beneath that parent element or inside of it is what are children elements. And then you can have inside of those children, more children. And it's basically a family tree. That's kind of how it's referred to. So when you hear those terminologies, just know that's what it is. But you don't really need to know that for our purposes. So matter of fact, let's just preview what it would look like on a page. Okay, so you can see the 4 elements and the red box. If we slide in, they don't move. Nothing moves. They're fixed to the page. There's no responsiveness added here yet, and we're going to cover that in later videos as well. But let's go back to the editor and see what we can do with alignment. So we'll go to Edit, and to get that to pop up, you just right-click. That's what I'm doing on my keyboard. So right-click, and we'll come to Layout. Now, there's going to be a bunch of stuff in this editor, but we don't need to worry about that now. Again, a lot of stuff you're going to be seeing, but it's not important right now. We'll get to it. So we'll start with Layout. Right now, the parent element is a fixed layout, meaning we can move these elements wherever we want, and there needs to be no alignment. They don't need to be in certain positions. They can free float wherever. The second we change that to align parent, say, so you see all the elements snapped to different locations on its parent. So what's going on? Well, let's click on an element, right-click, Edit, and we'll see what the positioning is looking like. So we have a parent container type, and it's saying we have an align to parent, meaning this child, its parent has an align to parent alignment. So to move the child, all we simply have to do is click these arrows. Simple as that. You just click the arrows and it positions where you want the element to be within that parent. Okay, but what if we change from align parent to row? What do you think will happen? Well, we get a row of elements, all of them aligned to each other at the very top. So when we click different options in container alignment, you can see we have left align right now. We can do centered, right aligned, or we can do space, let's see what this is called, space around, and this one is space between. Perfect. So the only difference between those two is in space around, you're just going to have these spaces on the very outer edges. And if you do space between, it's going to take up as much space as possible, push it all the way to the far left and far right. Now, I can only imagine what's going to happen if we pick column. Oh, what's going to happen? Yep, exactly. Column layout, nothing special. And if we click these container alignments again, it does the exact same thing, but in a column form. So we could have multiple columns in this parent. We could have rows and columns, but this just gives you an idea of the basic layouts of how these child components interact when they're inside their parent. Now, we can also move each one individually. So right now they're all in a row. Okay, let's space them out a bit. Let's actually give them max space. And we'll select a specific element, and then we'll center it. Okay, so now this one is offset to the center of the rest of the column. However, let's say we added another button. Well, where would it go? What would happen? Okay, you can see it just added in a column. It didn't let us move it anywhere else outside of the column, unless we go outside of the parent, of course. But it just floats in the column format, and we can change the order of these, but it's always going to stay in the format that the parent has. So we have column, they're all always going to be in a column. Now, of course, we can move all of them individually. So we want this far right. You can see it moves over all the way to the right. We want this one to be in the middle, so on and so forth. That's how you move them around. Now, let's say we change back to row and see what that looks like. So now, we have 5. One bled off the page or didn't have enough space, so it wraps below the first row. So we ran out of space, and all it's going to do is wrap to the next row. So say we don't want it to wrap. Say we want that button to be on the same row as all of the other elements. What do? Well, there's 2 options. We can either decrease the size of all of the buttons so they can fit, or we increase the size of the parent. And that's actually where we're going to be concluding our first lesson. And the next lesson, we're going to be going over sizing of elements, as well as a little bit more on margin and padding. So stay tuned for that. But honestly, give yourself a pat on the back for even completing lesson 1, as it's further than 99% of people are going to get. So I'll see you in the next one.